All right, thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here to see so many women in this space discussing data science and AI. And I'm also very happy about the closing remarks earlier about interacting more interdisciplinary, about networking, because this is my key point today, bringing together psychology and technology, and why I think this is important, especially today. Let me focus on 2 points that I want to stress where, for me, psychology meets technology, especially also in the marketing domain. On the one hand, in our research, we use psychology to understand consumer reactions to AI and technology and new interfaces. And to illustrate why I think this is important, you can develop the best AI model, the best algorithm, have a good, medical diagnosis. In the end, this tool or algorithm that you've developed is worth nothing if the human or the doctor, etc., is not using it. So there's this so-called last mile problem with big data is you can build really nice models, but in the end, somebody has to use that information and has to be able to trust that information. And this is why we focus on this side of big data and AI. How can we design these interfaces to where people can rely on them, trust them, and understand them better? To illustrate with one example, and I'm particularly happy that we had lots of examples from the medical domain this morning. I want to ask the audience, we're right before lunch, so let's get a little bit more active. What would you prefer? Say you are currently feeling a lot sick and you have 2 options. You can either have a doctor that makes that diagnosis for you, or you can have an AI system. Who would trust or prefer a doctor? Please raise your hand. Interesting, especially coming from this crowd. So who would trust an AI system or prefer an AI system? I am very, very surprised by that result. Honestly, I expected that a lot more people, especially in this crowd, would trust an AI system. Because there's tons of research showing that in many of these areas, AI or the algorithms that you are developing outperform doctors in diagnosis because they are trained on so much more data. But what we typically find in the area is when we ask the general public, most people prefer to have a diagnosis by a doctor. Obviously, this is a problem. And the reason why we find this, so people or patients say they prefer a doctor, they are also willing to pay more for a doctor making the diagnosis. And if they have a doctor that is using an additional decision support system, what we find is that this particular doctor is seen as less competent. This is a problem. So from a psychological point of view, it's important to understand why this happens. And one reason, especially in the medical domain, that we find is people do not trust systems because they don't want to be reduced to a number. They believe that AI systems are good at calculating things, are good at finding patterns, but they are not good at considering their unique circumstances. And in the medical domain, they think that their circumstances are very unique. They want to have somebody they talk to and they can see and face that knows their situation, that understands their situation. And as a consequence, they do not trust these systems as much. And of course, there's other areas where this plays a key role, and this is where this research is going. So we have areas where people tend to distrust algorithms and AI systems, which is typically in more social purpose areas and subjective tasks. So for instance, there was a Harvard study, they developed a joke mechanism or recommender system, and people did not like an algorithm giving them jokes because this is something very subjective, it's something very emotional, and an algorithm is not good at that. So typical example for algorithm aversion. On the other hand, on the other extreme, what we find is people are overly trusting in algorithms and AI when it comes to objective tasks and more computational functions. To give you one example, for instance, when we talk about hiring decisions, there's lots of algorithms that are developed to promote or support hiring decisions. And what a Stanford study found, shockingly, is if an algorithm gives the same discriminating recommendation, it is not perceived as discriminating. In the same way that the same decision is perceived by a human. And this is a problem that goes back to this perception of an algorithm is neutral, is objective, that causes people to believe whatever the outcome is, especially when we talk about, it's a 98% accuracy, it kind of feels like, this has been calculated, so it's natural, neutral, objective. So it kind of promotes that perception. And ultimately, people do not see that, a system might be biased as well. So again, on the other hand, this is another big problem where you see that people are overly reliant on algorithms in these areas and trust them too much. And what we want to do in our research area is this area sweet spot of appropriate reliance. So designing these systems in a way to where people understand what are shortcomings, to understand, when to trust these systems, but also understand, especially in the medical domain, that they can be very helpful and that they can help them, get a better diagnosis, etc. Another way in which we focus on psychology and bringing that together with AI and technology is using psychology to shape consumer reactions with AI and big data. Let me illustrate that with one example from our research. So this project was on conversational style matching. Conversational style matching is something very common, very widely reported phenomenon in social psychology. It basically means that when we interact with each other, we kind of imitate each other's behaviors. So during lunch break, start to observe that in your own interactions. When you interact with other people, what we typically do is, we start nodding or you lean your hand. So you imitate through, for instance, body language, the behavior of the person next to you. But we don't only do this with body language, we also do it through verbal mimicry. So verbal mimicry basically means we focus on how we communicate. Style words, typical style words like articles, pronouns, negations, etc. They only make about 0.5% of all the words that we have, so it's only a few words, but they make up about 50% of our communication. So we can have a very unique way in which we use these articles and pronouns. To give you an example, younger people typically use less articles. Women typically use more personal pronouns like you and we, this showing this togetherness. So there's typical patterns that we can find and see in the way that people communicate. And the idea of conversational style matching is that over time, throughout in conversation, we adapt to each other in the way that we use these style words. So put very, very simply is we start to talk in the same way. So it's all about the style, not about the content, but we mimic each other in our behavior, in our verbal communication. And the interesting aspect that social psychology has shown over and over again is that this conversational style matching is a good indicator of closeness in a relationship. So looking at WhatsApp chats, you can, for instance, see if people have currently fighting with their partners or if their relationship is currently in a good state. So if it's not in a good state, your conversational style matching would go further apart. If you have a good relationship, it goes closer together. So you imitate each other a lot more. Now, clearly, coming from a business background, we thought, this is a very interesting finding. Can we use that in a business context as well? So we started with our project with this basic question: what if businesses match the style of their customers? So can we also use conversational style matching proactively to kind of induce these feelings of closeness for a customer with a company? So again, this is the way we used social psychology to inform new ideas for data science projects, etc. And basically, this is what we did with several different studies, looking at conversational styles at a contact center, for instance, So we had transcripts from a call center here in Switzerland, and analyzed, if call center and customer calling in had a high conversational style match. And the interesting aspect that we found there is that when you have a high conversational style match, calls are a lot shorter, about 20% to be exact. And the underlying idea is that once you have aligned conversational styles, it increases processing fluency. So basically, things are a lot easier for you to understand if somebody talks in the way that you talk. So for businesses, this was a really interesting aspect because obviously they can save a lot of costs when you reduce caller times. Now, clearly this was mainly correlational, so we also did some experiments to see, if we design our own chatbot and have these chatbots talk in different conversational styles to where they would adapt to customers, how is that, improving feelings of closeness, etc. And we did that with a travel agent and found that even if it was an automated conversational agent, it could increase sales, so whatever recommendations we would give, by 8%, and it also increased these feelings of rapport, feeling satisfied with the interaction, while still people were very happy about that they understood everything and followed through the conversations a lot faster. And finally, we also tested it in the area of marketing, social media marketing. A big problem in social media when you have paid posts is that influencers are not seen as authentic. They usually take the language from the brand that they're supposed to promote. And we figured, what if they simply match the style of their followers in these paid posts. And what happens is that this perceived authenticity goes up, people like the posts more, and people also engage a lot more with these sponsored posts, which is usually really hard to achieve because sponsored posts is, promoting a particular brand, etc. So overall, for us, this was, again, one way to use ideas from psychology, social psychology that are well established to inform use cases that you can use in a business context to inform your data science projects. Now, obviously, and this is my final note, I know the time is quite moving forward. Obviously, one big topic for us at the moment is ChatGPT also plays a big role since we talk about language, etc. And I want to close with one thought. You talked about the fourth industrial revolution. For us, currently, the development is interesting because I know all of you have talked about AI and data science for years. So for you, this is nothing new. But for the public, it is. Now, ChatGPT and this whole development at the moment has put AI in the spotlight. So everybody is talking about it. People are concerned. Educators are discussing to ban this from university, etc. All this going on. And what you hear with that is there's lots of concerns, lots of misconceptions about what these things can do and can't do. So my final point with, and this is my closing remark, is ultimately we should see this as a chance of bringing disciplines together and informing the public, increasing AI literacy so we can have an informed discussion and we can hopefully promote an appropriate reliance on these systems to where people can use it to their advantage and will benefit from their potential. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for the interesting talk, and I'm sure there might be a lot of questions already. So we have one question on Slido. I'll start with that. What features are you extracting from conversations to categorize the conversational styles, and what are the main types of conversational styles?
Interesting question. So what we do is, or at least that's how we started. We're changing now because with all these new developments. But what we did is start with LIVC. I don't know who knows the tool. It's a very common tool in social psychology, and it distracts the different style words. So in total, there's 9 style word categories, like I mentioned, pronouns, articles, etc. And basically what it does is give you the frequencies with which people are using these different style word categories. And this is what this conversational style matching calculation is based on looking at the frequencies of these different style word categories and if they match over time with the conversation partner. There's different approaches depending on which kind of communication you're talking about. So the formula is a little bit different for people that are using or comparing letters compared to using a chatbot where you have this short turn taking, where it's more dynamic and you have to look at who's leading the conversation and who's following. But the underlying idea is always based on these 9 style word categories, at least for English and German language. This is working quite well.
Thank you. So do we have some questions from the audience? Oh, wow. So I think someone there started.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I have plenty of questions, but I will just make one and maybe reach you later at the
sure,
lunch or something.
Sure, do that, definitely.
Yeah, so about this conversational style matching, I guess it works the best when it's on one-to-one basis, right? So when you are in a group of people with a diverse style of speaking, how does this algorithm works in adapting dynamically to each style?
Oh, yeah, and that also relates to what I didn't answer with the archetypes. This is also a very common question that we get. So yes, we do that individually. So it basically calculates a score and how much we match with these individual style word categories. So it's not like we're doing any archetyping, but since we got the question so often, we started doing that with brand archetypes and brand personalities, etc. So we can do that with different archetypes. And regarding what you mentioned with doing that dynamically in an audience, or also big question in a call center, how do you do that? So the way we approached that was you can have a style profile, for instance, for a call center agent. And whenever somebody calls in, you can automatically analyze in the beginning. Whenever somebody's calling, gives you a problem, you can run that algorithm and then see, your style match with that person is highest, and you would route the caller to that agent. With a big audience, for instance, what we did on social media is basically look at the different people and the styles that they used when they commented, for instance, on social media, and then simply go ahead and calculate an aggregate score. Yeah.
Okay, and we had some more questions. Yeah, on that side.
Thanks for the talk. So one problem that is quite well known in trust is the uncanny valley effect. So if it gets too close, then people get a bit, it's a bit creepy.
Yeah.
So I wonder, in a way, why the style priming works so well. So is it because the choice of these words that you're considering, so mainly function words, is mostly unconscious, subconscious, but is it that? Or because in a way you would find it also a bit weird that if it gets too close, then...
Very good point. So when we talk about humanization, and style matching is one way to make it more personal and make it more human-like because we adapt to your style. One thing, it is very unconscious. So even if we show people, different advertisements in different styles, you have to pay close attention because it's these tiny words we usually don't pay big attention to. We always focus on content words. But we react very instinctively to style. Because, we process it more easily, but it's not in our prime focus. So I think that works very unconsciously. But another aspect that you mentioned with the uncanny valley is, for instance, when we humanize a chatbot, we're not only focusing on style, right? There's other ways to anthropomorphize technology. And I think the uncanny valley in its initial form, it is positive. It just is, when it gets too close to human-like and it's not performing in that way, then it gets negative. And I think this is when you combine different versions and what you had with early chatbots that were not communicating in a very natural way. They had this uncanny valley effect where they didn't feel good in their interaction. I think the better technology actually gets to this final point, you actually have this positive effect where we go beyond the uncanny valley. But again, usually it's more than just one element you're using to humanize. You use a name for the chatbot, you use a picture, etc. All these elements together humanize the technology. And as a final point, we also have studies that humanization is not always preferable, so there's instances where you want to take this component out as well. But this is another area of I could talk a lot about. So.
Okay, maybe one last question, and then here maybe, and then yes, we're probably over time.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you mentioned some projects. Do you collaborate in any way with digital health or with healthcare in general? Because they also have chatbots there, and with the whole rise of digital.
Yes, we did a couple of years ago, at least we had discussions. And my former group at ETH is very active in this area still. But this is often really hard to do field experiments for us because of the very particular context. So there's other contexts where it's a lot easier, but it's not that we're not interested in this area. Since I mentioned in the beginning, I think this is where it is important to educate patients so where they can actually benefit from these applications. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot more questions maybe during the lunch break or so. But yes, thank you so much. And a small goodie bag from our side. Thank you.
Thank you.